These 2 months will give a strong indication of Maliki's continuation, or whether we go into the crisis of looking for another Prime Minister. Humam Hamoudi, Senior Leader, Supreme Islamic Council in Iraq.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. Today we are discussing the long-range policy of the United States in Iraq with Dr. Pollock, Mr. Kaneta, and Dr. Qandil. Mr. Kaneta, before the break, David Pollock was saying that he's slightly concerned about the role of Iran. Well, one of the establishments, one of the tools that came with the invasion, after the invasion, was Faylaq Badr, the Badr Brigade that was established in Iran for almost 20 years. Now, that is not going to disband immediately, and Iran's influence is going to rise steadily in the long future. Wouldn't you say that?
Well, I think it's right that Iran sees Iraq correctly as its neighbor and its backyard. That doesn't give it the right to intervene there. But to a fair extent, Iraq now has become the playground of nations, hasn't it? I think that the question of the militias disbanding, clearly they should disband. They have no place in a modern nation. But a more useful way of looking at this is what conditions can we create that will lead them to actually be disbanded? We need to say more than they should be disbanded. The principal problem, I think, is that there is no force on the ground inside of Iraq that is representative of all of the Iraqi communities, that the Iraqi army and police forces are themselves fully implicated in the sectarian contention of the various communities. So until you reach a political accommodation between those communities that expresses itself as a truly national army, you're going to have militias.
Dr. Pollock, ostensibly, that is the very reason behind this operations and previous operations. The military operations basically is to create the political conditions. But 4 years on, that political condition is still not there. So what are we looking at? 10, 12, 15 years? As David Petraeus said, perhaps this insurgency will continue for another 12 years?
It's quite possible. I would certainly hope that it won't take that long, but I think these are typically conflicts that take years to settle. Now, that doesn't mean that the violence could or should continue at this rate for the next indefinite period. I think that the United States is looking for quicker results than that, and I think that if we don't see significant progress in the next year, then we're going to have a very serious reassessment.
Perhaps that is on the wishful part, Dr. Pollock. You know, others, they look at it differently. Come September and the testimony of David Petraeus, and if he says, well, I still need more time, perhaps more troops, and as the elections unfold in the United States, and there are statements by Secretary of Defense that perhaps up to 60,000 of the U.S. troops will be pulled, then we will see a spike rather than a lessening of the violence in Iraq.
Well, that depends on how good the Iraqis turn out to be at controlling the situation in their own country. It is their country. It's not an American responsibility, in my view, and the Iraqis are going to have to take control, so that if they don't do that, the United States, in my opinion, is not going to be there forever to protect them from themselves, nor should it be.
Mr. Kaneta, how do you listen to such thing like absolving the responsibility of the United States?
Well, certainly we have a responsibility. Where Iraq is today, it wouldn't be. Whether you measure that as a positive thing or a good thing or a mix of the two, the United States has been and remains the chief player there. The American party in Iraq is the strongest party. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that we can simply solve the situation there. I think what we will see in the next couple of years, if there isn't a dramatic improvement there, opinion in this country will mount to reduce our presence. One possible outcome is that there will be a surge in violence. But with the United States and our presence there and our perception as being an occupying force, which is shared by majorities of Iraqis, implies that you can't simply assume that all you get if we leave or reduce our presence is a surge in violence that continues.
Dr. Saad, when the Americans, they talk about Iraq, especially about reducing forces, they use words like deployment, they use words like, retreatment to military bases. Do you ever envisage a situation where the U.S. will leave Iraq totally?
To start with, let me comment and disagree with Dr. Bullock's comment regarding Badr Brigade. Badr Brigade is not related to Iran at all. It has been well-known Iraqi force which has got clear history in fighting the previous regime. And second, this brigade has been disbanded. It is now
it has changed name, but it has not disbanded, because the fighting in Amara we saw between Badr and Jaish al-Mahdi, it makes you wonder who were the fighters then.
When I say disbanded, I'm saying disbanded as a militia.
You mean changed names?
That there is no skirmishes or fighting. Everybody in Iraq has got light arms as a defense. This is absolutely legal. It doesn't mean, and people can use these arms to fight each other.
Dr. Saad, you are not going to convince anybody, and you are not going to win the argument by stating that a Badr was really created in Iraq. The leadership, the Politburo, the financing, the training was all done in Iraq during the 80s and the 90s. So let's move beyond this point, because it's really mute.
No. You see, that is a misconception. I did not say that Badr was created in Iraq. Badr was created in Iran. And in fact, yes, the Iranian government thankfully gave good support.
And you are doing the bidding of Iran now.
Badr. And we do have good relationship.
You are doing the
Iran.
bidding of Iran in Iraq now.
That does not mean it is linked to Iran. And secondly, it has been disbanded by the order of the late chairman of the Supreme Council, Sayyid Mohammed Baqir al-Hakim. I think the U.S. government have the main responsibility, because the U.S. Army still hold the security portfolio, in the sense that the chain of command is in the hand of the American Army.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think we're on the same wavelength here. I'm talking about the future. When I said that I don't think Iraq is or should be an American responsibility, I mean in the future. Right now, there's no question that at least from a security standpoint, that the primary responsibility is in American hands.
Mr.
But
Koneta,
I think looking ahead,
right now there is approximately 160,000 U.S. troops in Iraq, perhaps 100,000 security contractors. Eventually, the financial drain on the United States somehow will force it to reduce its presence in Iraq, perhaps to retreat to secure bases. A few of them are being built. The largest U.S. embassy in Iraq is being built. As a dispassionate analyst, is the fate of the U.S. and Iraq linked forever, and we can see a situation where the U.S. will be in Iraq, as in Germany, as in South Korea, as in Japan, for the next 40, 50 years?
What we see here in the United States on both sides of the aisle, Democratic and Republican, is, I believe, no intention to leave Iraq anytime soon. That even the plans for withdrawal or for redeployment that were briefly in the supplemental left provisions that could allow 30 or 40,000 troops to remain there indefinitely. We see here in Washington a number of new think tanks springing up in preparation for the forthcoming presidential election, some of them with former Clinton officials, and a recent plan by one of them, a leading think tank, foresaw staying in Iraq at least through 2012.
Final comment from Dr. Saad. How do you assess such a statement that the U.S. is going to be at least in the medium short in Iraq?
I have no doubt that the situation in Iraq would never settle with the existence of the American troops in Iraq. And secondly, it can only settle upon full training, full equipment, full arming of the Iraqi forces, to the extent that they could, they take full command and they take full responsibility for the security matters. Only then that I could foresee the security situation in Iraq would settle down.
That is definitely one point of view. The other point of view is as soon as the Americans leave, the real civil war in Iraq will start. Dr. Saad Jawad Qandil, Carl Canetta, Dr. David Pollock, gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. We have reached the end of this show. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Goodbye.